Let's jump right in. Today, we're exploring the absolutely mesmerizing journey of Yayoi Kusama. You probably know her as the global icon of polka dots and those incredible infinity mirrors, right? But as we'll see in this explainer, this isn't just some story about eccentric art or trendy immersive exhibits. For Kusama, art was, and literally still is, a visceral mechanism for survival.
Which brings us to the big question we're answering today. How exactly did a young girl's terrifying visions transform into some of the world's most celebrated art? It's really a classic hero's journey, where creativity becomes both the weapon to fight back the darkness and the shield against her deepest internal fears.
Okay, let's dive into this. Chapter 1, The Girl Who Drew Infinity. To really grasp her ambition, we have to go back to 1945. In the post-war ruins of Matsumoto, Japan, a young Kusama made a decision. She was going to become a painter no matter what. By 1948, she's studying traditional Japanese painting in Kyoto. And then in 1957, she takes this absolute leap of faith and moves to New York. Keep in mind, overseas travel for a young, unconnected female artist back then, almost unheard of. These weren't just geographical steps, they were massive, courageous leaps. But while she was in Kyoto, she ran into some serious artistic friction. She was studying Nihonga, traditional Japanese painting. Now, it's undeniably beautiful stuff. We're talking delicate brushwork, nature motifs, but with very rigid historical rules. Kusama's mind, on the other hand, was just bursting with infinite worlds and endless dots. She wanted to break out of that rigid frame. She quickly realized that traditional techniques just couldn't capture the dizzying universe she saw in her head. She didn't want to copy the existing world. She needed to create her own.
Section 2, Challenge to New York. So what sparked this bold rebellion?
Well, she was feeling trapped, desperate for a way out of Japan's restrictive art scene. So she writes a letter asking, I am painting in Japan. How can I work in the world? But the wild part is who she sent it to. Completely out of the blue, she sends this to the famous American artist Georgia O'Keeffe. Kusama had seen a book of O'Keeffe's work, felt this deep connection, and just went for it, despite the language barrier. And amazingly, O'Keeffe actually wrote back. She offered kind, encouraging advice, and that single reply gave Kusama the push she needed. In 1957, she packed up her canvases and crossed the ocean. Just imagine arriving in Manhattan in the 1950s. High-rises scraping the sky, a completely different language, a foreign culture, and absolutely zero guarantees of success. For a young woman from rural Matsumoto, it must have felt like landing on another planet. It was vast, it was noisy, completely overwhelming. But Kusama wasn't afraid of failing. Her only real fear was being unable to express the art that was just burning inside her. Of course, success didn't happen overnight. Chapter 3, Avant-Garde Born from Loneliness. Those early days in 1960s New York were the true crucible of her journey. She's living in freezing, impoverished studios, sometimes without even enough money for proper meals. And she would stand in front of these massive white canvases and just begin. One small semicircle, then another one, and yet another one. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of tiny, repetitive brushstrokes, layering over each other like waves in the ocean or stars in the sky. This hypnotic, dizzying repetition birthed her famous infinity nets. It wasn't just a painting technique, it was her physical way of taking the terrifying hallucinations in her mind and dragging them out into reality. But here's the thing, a flat canvas eventually ends. Kusama's vision did not, so she pushed beyond the canvas and developed a concept she called accumulation. It's the act of multiplying the same shape limitlessly. She started sewing countless soft fabric protrusions onto everyday furniture, chairs, tables, shoes, even a full-size rowboat. By obsessively accumulating these shapes over mundane items, she was actively working to overcome her own deep-seated fears, transforming ordinary, comforting objects into something completely overwhelming and entirely new. And this obsessive repetition naturally evolved into what she's most famous for today. Chapter 4, Polka Dots and Self-Obliteration. It's the question we all wonder when we first see her work, right? Whether it's in a museum or on a luxury handbag. Why polka dots? Why cover absolutely everything in these endless, brightly colored spheres? Well, the answer is profoundly personal. Since childhood, Kusama had experienced these terrifying visual hallucinations where her entire surroundings, the walls, the ceiling, the floor, the sky, were completely covered in dots. But instead of running from that terror, she weaponized it.
She fought her fear by continuously painting those exact same dots onto clothes, walls, and even the people around her. She actively confronted the very thing that terrified her, stripping away its power by recreating it on her own terms.
And this leads right into her ultimate philosophy, self-obliteration. Just listen to the weight of that term, self-obliteration. It's the sensation of your physical outline blurring and melting away into the infinite universe. In 1965, she achieved this physically by creating her groundbreaking infinity mirror room. By using mirrors and repetitive patterns, the room infinitely reflects light and objects. When you step inside, you're not just looking at the art anymore. You become part of it. Your reflection multiplies thousands of times until you literally dissolve into the infinite.
As the decades passed, her art evolved once again, shifting back toward her roots. Chapter 5: Hometown and Pumpkins. Notice the stark contrast here in her life and artistic tone. On one side, we have the harsh, freezing, intense avant-garde energy of her 1960s New York days. But on the other, the Japanese pumpkin. The pumpkin motif is warm, it's grounded, earthy, deeply comforting. It's actually a direct callback to the unpretentious pumpkin fields of her childhood in Matsumoto. It brought this sense of quiet strength and rustic safety to her chaotic, infinite worlds. By 1973, she was utterly exhausted by the relentless pace of New York and her own ongoing internal struggles, so she returned to Japan. And in 1977, she made a deeply pragmatic choice. She voluntarily entered a psychiatric hospital. Now, it's really important to understand that this hospital wasn't a prison for her. It actually became her sanctuary. It provided the strict, safe, predictable routine she absolutely needed to survive and to keep making that daily trek to her nearby studio. It simply allowed her to safely continue her daily creation.
And ultimately, the seeds planted in all that struggle and isolation blossomed. Our final chapter: Art is the hope to live.
The world finally caught up to her genius, and it led to massive global validation. In 1993, she officially represented Japan at the prestigious Venice Biennale, filling the space with her radiant yellow pumpkins. Fast forward to the 21st century, and she's having these massive retrospectives in London, Paris, New York, Seoul. Audiences literally wait in line for hours today, not just to look at a painting on a wall, but to step inside and actively experience her worlds. She was decades ahead of the immersive art trend we see everywhere today. But when you're standing inside one of those dazzling mirrored spaces, what does the Infinity Mirror Room actually teach us? What are we supposed to take away from standing in an endless reflection? The truth is, it doesn't give answers. It asks questions. Where do we come from? What is a single human being in the vastness of the cosmos? Where is infinity? Through a simple, brilliant combination of light and reflection, her work ultimately strips away our ego and reflects our own minds right back at us. Kusama once powerfully stated, "Art is my life itself." She took the unbearable, lifelong pain and fear of a young girl from Matsumoto and meticulously, obsessively turned it into a breathtaking universe of beauty, one that resonates with millions of people across the globe. So, I want to leave you with this final thought today. If unimaginable suffering can be transformed into breathtaking, universal beauty, what new worlds might your own challenges empower you to create? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the infinite.